Hello and welcome to the latest edition of my podcast today. I'm delighted to be joined by BBC Sports leading football journalist Simon Stone again. Simon, first and foremost, how have you been?
I've been good, thank you. Busy as always, keeping up with the comings and goings at various footballing clubs, and clearly Wigan Athletic is still alive. Football story and of major interest. So, yeah, we're busy.
Over the last couple of days, it's been quite quiet in terms of news around Wigan Athletic. Can you shed some light on what's been happening at the football club?
Well, obviously, there's the appeal against the 12-point penalty on Friday. So there's a lot of work gone into going into preparing for that and preparing to make Wigan's case. And clearly, there's an issue over the ownership. The preferred bidder has kind of fallen by the wayside. So the administrators are on with the second bidder now. And then obviously there's a situation over the players, the uncertainty there, because clearly the club needs to raise the money to pay the wages in July and August.
What is the situation with the players?
So obviously we had the announcement on Friday about Jensen Weir joining Brighton. And, you know, that could be the first, I wouldn't say the first of many, but I think there's going to be a few players that need to go out of the club in order for the club to meet its obligations in terms of the players. When you think that there's no games now being played, there's no matches on TV, clearly there's no fans in the stadium, any little bit of business that's been done in terms of merchandise, that's not going to be enough to cover salaries, and the administrators clearly have to do that. So, you know, it's got to be within the realms of possibility that there'll be more player sales before the ownership situation is resolved.
In addition to that, is it true that players can leave for free if the wages aren't paid?
Not immediately. I think they can. In my experience, you're allowed 3 months, and if a player goes 3 months and he's not being paid, then effectively his contract is null and void. But in my experience, you know, it can't be done immediately. I've never known a situation where players have just unilaterally left football clubs because 1 month's payments have been late. And don't forget, there's no wages outstanding at the moment. July's payments are not due yet. June's have been paid in full. So I don't think we're quite at that situation yet.
That's good news to hear for Wigan fans. Obviously, we don't want to see our players and best assets lose for nothing. And I want to link back to the point appeal. What is the process, and obviously, when can fans expect a verdict?
Well, the process is basically that it'll be heard by a 3-person panel, all very experienced in the legal niceties around sport, and the Football League will put their case, and Wigan Athletic will put their case. I wouldn't anticipate that will be a verdict immediately. It wouldn't surprise me if it was over a week after the hearing, if by the time it comes through. Obviously, we don't know the timescales, but it certainly won't be on Friday evening.
Absolutely. And what kind of impact does this have, not knowing what division Wigan Athletic will be in, to potential buyers?
Well, as I understand it, the administrators are quite kind of relaxed about the whole situation, and they think, despite this issue over the preferred bidder, they think they're in a reasonably strong position. So clearly prospective buyers are aware of the uncertainty around Wigan, and clearly now within the negotiations they're working on a theory or a basis that Wigan could well be playing in League One next season, and Hopefully they won't, but they might well be. And I think that's the basis on which negotiations are taking place now. And I think it's up to, as ever, and as Gerald Krasner highlighted, it's up to prospective purchasers to effectively put a non-refundable deposit down and then work around getting their money in order and their payments in order to facilitate the deal, providing everything is to their satisfaction.
Do you think this deal can be very dependent on Wigan Athletic's league status?
Their league status, as in
terms of what division they'll be in?
No, I don't think so. I wouldn't have thought. I don't get the impression that the administrators would have chosen as one of their kind of highest bidders a bid that was dependent on Wigan being in the Championship or in League One. I think they will have gone for what they viewed as being the best deal for the football club. So I don't necessarily think that it will be a deal maker or breaker. To be honest, I just think it's part of a process, and either the club's going to be in League One or the Championship. But I think the key element is that the expectation is that when the league season starts on the 12th of September, Wigan Athletic will be in a league. And there was no guarantee of that the day that went into administration.
Absolutely. What do you think the next few days will have in store for the football club?
Well, what I said before, I think there's a lot of work being undertaken over the appeal. I think there are a lot of discussions around the sale of the club, clearly. There are a lot of discussions around assets within the club, including players. And I think now it's just a case of getting the contract signed. Obviously, Mr. Krasner said he was looking at July the 31st. So it's a case of getting to July the 31st and wondering whether or not we'll get some kind of statement from the club in terms of clarifying what the position is the potential takeover of the football club.
Have you had regular dialogue with the administrators since the start of July?
Yeah, I mean, I've been in touch with them a lot. I was in touch with them yesterday. I'll be in touch with them probably tomorrow or Thursday. But really, they can't tell me any more than what's already in the public domain, and I don't suspect there will be any change on that. I don't. If we've got until not until the 31st for the deal to be done, but until the 31st, in Krasner's words, so I wouldn't expect any kind of update before then. And clearly, with the appeal being held on Friday, it's going to be a big day for the football club.
Absolutely. Is it important for Wigan fans to remain patient throughout this?
Well, yeah, absolutely. What can the fans do? The fans can do nothing. They can worry a bit. But, in the round, I think the fact that Wigan Athletic almost certainly will still exist for next season was the most important thing. As I've said before, the appeal is being made with the hope of overturning a 12-point penalty, and that would keep the club in the Championship. But I wouldn't be putting, my house on that coming off. I think there's a lot of issues around that may make that difficult a difficult case to win. I think the information about the new owners, to be perfectly honest, is far more important. And as I say, I don't expect anything on that until the 31st of July.
How important is it for the next move for Wigan Athletic in terms of the new owners to secure the long-term future of the football club?
Yeah, well, I mean, the new owners wouldn't be bidding for the club unless they felt that they could secure the owners. I think secure the future of the club. I think the key point is that Wigan Athletic want a better owner than they've just had. That unfortunately in administration there's no guarantee of that. And there's been instances where clubs have gone into administration and ended up with a worse owner than they had. So, you want to avoid that if you can. But that is what Wigan fans, I think, should be hoping for now.
Absolutely, and I know you can't really offer opinions in terms of the EFL or a director's test, but what do you make of the Wigan Athletic Supporters Club petition to review the effectiveness of that test in terms of vetting new owners?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think the problem is that we can see what seems to be a fairly straightforward request, and then once you get into the detail, it's not quite as straightforward as you would think it is. And there's a few reasons for that. First of all, owners particularly are not keen on more regulation because that makes it harder for them to sell their asset, which is a football club. So you can see a reason why they wouldn't be that keen on change. And it's the owners who have to vote for change. So it's not something that can be done unilaterally. But so that's an issue. But also, what I'd want to say, I'd leave you with almost a thought, and maybe Wigan fans are not very predisposed to Bolton for obvious reasons. But Bolton Wanderers had an owner in Eddie Davis who basically bankrolled them to the Premier League and into Europe. And when all this was happening, when people like JJ Okocha and Yuri Djorkaeff and Ivan Campo were playing for Bolton, nobody said Eddie Davis is a bad owner. But the purchase of the players came at a cost. And that cost was rolled up into loans. And then towards the end of his life, Eddie Davis decided that he no longer wished to fund the football club. And he turned the funding off. And that put Bolton into a financial situation exactly the same as Wigan. The numbers were bigger, but it's exactly the same point that, the owner no longer wishes to pay for the football club. That has led to an unravelling at Bolton eventually that has put them into League Two. The question is, was Eddie Davis a good owner, and was he a bad owner? And that depends on what cycle of his ownership you're looking in. And that's what makes the owners and directors test and any kind of clarification over who owns a football club to be so complicated, because by any level whatsoever, Eddie Davis would be regarded as one of the best owners Bolton Wanderers has ever had. He would have passed any test that he had to undertake. And changing the rules doesn't necessarily mean that you can automatically avoid the kind of situation that Wigan Athletic have found themselves in just the same way as you might not have been able to avoid the situation that Bolton are in. So I think what the fans have done is fantastic, but they have to recognise that even if they get change, it doesn't necessarily mean that would have saved their football club from being in the position it is now.
That's an absolutely outstanding point, and it's real food for thought, because not only do the EFL, every chairman has to approve the change and obviously vote for it to come into place. It doesn't necessarily act as a safeguard, like you say. Do you think it could be a potential idea for the EFL to almost appoint an external independent board to carry out the test?
Well, but it's not for the EFL to do that. It's for the owners of the Football League clubs to do that. So are the owners of the Football League, the clubs in the Football League, going to pass legislation that would make it harder to sell a Football League club? That's what you've got to ask yourself.
Yeah, definitely, because football is a business at the end of the day, although it's a sport by nature. The football business side has probably took over in recent years, as you'll see with the Premier League. Championship now is becoming more commercialised, and it is.
But if you had a car, would you want someone to make it harder for you to sell your car?
That's You want.
That's what you got to ask yourself. These ideas are really good, and there's merit behind them, but ultimately, it's not the EFL. You have to remember that it's not the EFL that make the rules. It is the owners of the clubs that make the rules.
Yeah, and they're just the body there to kind of almost represent them.
The EFL are responsible for implementing them.
Yeah, and that's what you kind of have to consider throughout this. Over the last couple of weeks, Wigan Athletic fans have been outstanding in raising money to keep the club afloat. How important is that for obviously potential buyers to look into when they're seeing the club and seeing how much the fans care about the club and the town?
Well, I mean, the fans have been essential in the club being able to meet its obligations, as we know, in terms of getting to the end of the season. So, it was the fans that paid for the coach travel, the fans that paid for overnight accommodation, all the nuts and bolts of putting on a game, cutting the grass on the pitch. The fans have been responsible for that. So I don't think you can ever forget that. And I don't think the fans' contribution to this situation should be underestimated. And in an ideal world, the owner, the new owner, the first people that he should be meeting should be the fans' representatives to build a bridge, to, allow a conversation to take place. But, I'm not entirely sure that has ever been lacking at Wigan Athletic until the most recent owners came to the club. So I think the fans have been magnificent, and the club should be thankful for them and should keep the lines of communication to them open.
Absolutely, that's a great idea. And I'd like to say thank you for your work throughout this, because obviously you've been outstanding in providing content on BBC Sport for Wigan Athletic fans during these really unprecedented times. And we've got to say thank you for that, because it is nice to be kept aware of what's going on, especially in really uncertain times for a lot of people.
No worries.
So this has been a podcast with Simon Stone. Simon's been absolutely excellent in giving insight, and it was a really good debate as well about the EFL's owners and directors test. And Simon raised a lot of great points that maybe aren't really considered as much. And it's a fantastic insight from a fantastic journalist. So I'm glad to have had him on the podcast yet again, and I'd like to thank Simon for his participation and willingness to get involved too, because he's an extremely busy man. You can't underestimate how busy he actually is during the football season, obviously the Champions League, and it means a lot to me and a lot of people. So thank you so much.